Hey guys, welcome. So happy to have you here. So excited to paint with you guys today. Thank you so much for joining the painting class. I'm going to give us a few minutes to get started just so that everyone can sign on. So how's everyone doing today? I would love to know where everyone is joining from. From Seattle, so happy to have you. Virginia, Florida, California, Atlanta, Arizona, Virginia, San Antonio, Texas, Fort Lauderdale. Amazing, all over. So I'm so happy that you guys are here and you took out this time for yourself to either try something new or to continue your painting journey. I would love to know, is there anyone here who's painted with watercolors before? Is anyone a beginner, never painted before, or maybe has experience painting with some other medium? Total newbie. Awesome, so happy to have you, Meredith. Just with my 2-year-old. How fun. Never painted. Oh, so happy to have you, Julie. Well, I'm so excited for anyone who's never painted before because this course is basically designed for beginners, for people who have never painted. I talk a lot about like all the some of the techniques and things like that, but it's also just kind of to give you the confidence to try it and to just have fun. So even if you have painted before, I think it's just kind of nice, like seeing how someone else approaches the subject, and maybe pick up some new techniques and tips, and also just to have a weekly painting session together. Just really, really fun. Painted as a child, but now I'm a grandma. Oh, so happy to have you and painting again. Wow. All right, so a little bit about me. I'm Lauren. I'm a watercolor artist and illustrator and the owner of Lauren Taylor Creates. I'm originally from California, but I currently live in Ireland with my husband, James, and our dog, Maya. I've been a professional artist for 7 years, but I've painted my whole life. It's something that I've always loved to do. And I'm completely self-taught. So I've never gone to art school, but I have taken a lot of classes and workshops from other artists that I admire. And I think it's such a great way to learn. And so I've been so excited to teach. I taught this course a few months ago and it was just so much fun. I absolutely loved it. So I'm so excited to have brought it back. And I'm really inspired to paint a lot of natural things like landscapes and botanicals. So that's a lot of what's covered in Just Paint as well. I think that they work really well in watercolor and are quite beautiful. So today, I really want you to focus on just having fun, right? And playing with the paints. Especially if you're just starting out, you're painting for the first time, or you're just coming back to painting after a long time. I think it's easy to get kind of caught up on how something's developing and turning out. And watercolor especially is quite unpredictable. You can't always control the outcome, but that's part of what makes it so beautiful. It's kind of this strange relationship between wanting to control it and have it be perfect, but also kind of letting it do its thing. And I think we forget that, at the start, we're allowed to be bad. Not everything has to be a masterpiece. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't paint. Paint because you love it, not because you're just worried about creating something beautiful all the time. And that's something that I'm trying to remind myself always as well, to just paint for the process more so than what I'm actually creating, because I love the process of it. So I hope you take that away today. If you just have fun for the next hour and just kind of get out of your head, forget whatever is going on around you, and just enjoy, then I am very happy. So I hope you do enjoy it. So today we are painting lavender, which I'm really excited about. It's something that is so beautiful. I think a lot of people love lavender. The colors are really nice. If you saw the screen at the beginning of the class, we're using blue, yellow, and a pink. And so we'll be mixing our own green and our own purple. So we'll be practicing color mixing today, which is really nice. And yeah, so I hope you enjoy what we're painting, kind of walk you through it step by step. So I'll basically be breaking it down for you. I'll be painting it small section by small section, and I'll pause in between to let you paint then as well if you're painting along. And during that time, I'll be able to check the chat and see if there are any questions. You're more than welcome to ask questions along the way, and I will answer them as much as I can. You can either pop them in the chat, or there's a Q&A section as well. So I'll answer questions as I go and then do a bit of a Q&A at the end. So let's dive in. Just gonna switch my cameras here. You should be able to see my desk setup now. Just let me know if you guys are able to see this. Yes, awesome. So this is the painting that we're going to be working on today. It's a, like I said, a beautiful kind of two little sprigs of lavender, and they're very, very kind of loose. And this just kind of washed out material, watercolor that I really love to do, you know, have like a bit of structure, but a bit of that kind of softness that you can achieve with watercolors, which are so nice. So this is just to kind of give you an idea of what we'll be working on, and I'll kind of refer to this and pop it up as we go along, so you can kind of have an idea of what the finished product will look like. So I just wanted to talk you through my setup and the materials that I use. If you are painting along with me and you haven't set up your materials, feel free to pull your stuff out now and get set up. I'll just take a few minutes to talk through this, so that should give you some time to get your stuff out. If you're already set up, that's great. So I am using a block of watercolor paper. I love to use Arches. It's cold press paper. A block means that it's glued down on basically three sides with a little section here that you can slip a palette knife or a butter knife into to slice off the top piece of paper once your painting is dry. It's really great to use blocks like this where it's glued down like that, because it just helps restrict your paper while you're painting. So especially if you're doing a wash, you might have some buckling and warping from your paper. So it just helps to keep it kind of tight and down while you're working. If you don't have a block, that's perfectly okay. We're not going near the edges today. You know, we're just kind of working in the middle. So you shouldn't have to worry about your paper distorting. But if you did want to kind of restrict it, you could also tape it down on all the edges with masking tape. I am using a size 10 silver black velvet brush. This is probably my favorite brush, my favorite size. I use this one a lot. I don't like to use small brushes very often. I just find that you get too caught up in tiny details too quickly. So I tend to work with slightly larger brushes than you might imagine. This brush is wonderful because it comes to a very fine point, even though it's a little bit larger. So you still are able to get nice fine lines. It holds loads of liquid in it. And so it's really nice for washes. So I've been using these brushes for probably 6 years now, and I really love them. And then the palette that I use is just a cheap watercolor palette, and I use tubes of paint and squeeze them into the different wells. So the colors that we are using today are Quinacridone Magenta, Cadmium Lemon, Cobalt Blue, and Ultramarine. And if you don't have the Quinacridone, if you don't have the Quinacridone Magenta, that's okay. You can either use like alizarin crimson, red, or a shade of pink that you might have as well. And same goes with the yellow and the blues. If you're painting with slightly different colors, that's perfectly fine. We're just looking to achieve a shade of purple and a light green and a dark green. So that's what we'll be creating today. And then as you can see, I have 2 water glasses. One I use as my like dirty water. That is basically for rinsing my brush in between colors. The other one is what I refer to as my clean water. So basically when I want to add clear water to my paper to create these nice soft blends and bleeds, I don't want dirty water kind of sitting on the paper because that will actually show afterwards. I want to use clear, clean water to achieve those. And then I also have a little spray bottle that I use to just moisten up my paint before I start working. It's especially important to prep your paint if you're using like pans like these ones that come already kind of packed in these like little squares. You definitely want to, maybe stuck, no. And you definitely want to spray them before using them, just because they're a lot drier, a bit harder to kind of get working at the start without getting them nice and kind of juicy first. So definitely, if you're working with these ones, go ahead and spray them. Now, if you don't have a spray bottle, you can take your brush, get it wet, not dripping wet, but just get it wet. You can dab off some of the excess and you can just massage your brush over it just to get that paint started. You can do that the same for these ones. So I spray them, or you can just run your brush over it, and that kind of helps to get the paint working before we get started. And then of course I have here some paper towels that are folded up, and this just helps me control how much water and liquid is in my brush. So if there's any excess, I'll just dab my brush on my paper towels. You'll see me doing that quite a lot. All right, so if you have not already, go ahead and get your paint wet. Again, we're using Quinacridone Magenta, Cadmium Lemon, Cobalt Blue, and Ultramarine. Can everyone hear the music okay? Can turn it up a little bit. I love listening to Spanish guitar music while I'm painting. I just find it so relaxing. It just helps me get into the zone, and it's been such a hit with the last Just Paint class. It's so nice. All right, so we're gonna get started. The first thing I'm going to do is mix up the colors that we are going to be using. So like I said, we're going to make a purple and 2 shades of green. And I'm gonna mix all 3 of those shades up now before we get started on the painting. And I do that because I want my colors to blend and kind of bleed together as I'm going. I don't want the painting to dry as I'm working on it. So if I have the paint ready mixed, then I can just work away and I don't have to worry about mixing more colors as I'm going. So the first color that we're going to make is going to be the purple. So I'm going to get my brush nice and wet. Just make sure all the bristles are soaked in water. Right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically scoop water from my cup onto the mixing area. So to do that, just get a lot of water on my brush, have it dripping wet, and then just drop that water onto the mixing area. You can use the sides even to scrape off the excess water onto the area. And so I'm going to do that 4 times. 2, 3, so there's a nice amount of water now in my mixing area. So I'm going to add the colors to the water. So I'm going to add my Quinacridone Magenta first. And don't be afraid to really get in there with your paint, especially if it's dry. You just really want to get a lot of paint on your brush. And watercolor brushes are nice and tough, so you don't have to be too precious with them. If you just squeeze your paint out from the tube onto a palette like this, just be a little bit more careful because the paint can still be quite thick, and it can actually kind of stick to your brush. So you can see the color on my brush. There's quite a bit of paint on there, and I'm just going to drop that onto my mixing area. And again, you can use the sides to just help scrape that paint off your brush and on to your palette, like so. And if you have a new palette, you might notice that the paint and the water is kind of balling up, and that's perfectly normal for new palettes. Especially once we start adding more paint, you'll notice that mine doesn't do that. And it's simply because your palette is new. So just give it a little bit of time and it will stop doing that. All right, so I'm going to rinse my brush off. And now I don't want to be adding too much water to this mixture anymore. So I'm just going to kind of scrape off the sides of my water dish, the dripping excess water. And then I'm going to go into my Cobalt Blue and do the same thing. And add that to my magenta. And you want nearly like a 50-50 mixture of paint and water. That's just kind of your good medium paint mix. So if you find that your paint seems runny, like really runny, or still quite clear, you can add more paint to this mixture. Or if it looks, say, too pink or too blue, go ahead and grab a little bit more of the other color. I'm just going to grab actually a little bit more blue, and I'm going to add it to this top corner here, just to make that area of the palette just a little bluer. Because, like, as you can see in the painting here, even though I've only mixed one shade of purple, there's some nice variety in the purple. Like right here is quite blue. Over here is a little bit pinkier. So we don't have to mix a completely separate section. We can just have one nice big mix of purple, but then grab a little bit of a bluer section, a little bit of a pinker section. And feel free to ask any questions as we go along. I'm happy to answer anything, or if I'm going a little too quick or a little too slow, just let me know. And so next we are going to mix the light green. So again, I'm just going to come into my water dish, and I'm going to scoop 4 brushfuls of water into my mixing area. So that's 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to come into my Cadmium Lemon and really load up my brush again. and drop that into my water. And rinse my brush off. And again, like I just kind of was dabbing it there on the paper towel. When I go into the Cobalt Blue, I don't want to be adding loads of water into this paint well. It just will make it kind of messy. So I just dab off any excess paint. But if you notice that you're having a hard time lifting paint because it's a little too dry, maybe you can always add a little bit of water to your brush and then come into your Cobalt Blue. So grab some of your Cobalt Blue and drop that into your Cadmium Lemon so we get a nice bright green. May add just a little more blue. That was quite neon. But we are looking for a bright green because we're going to make a nice dark green over here. And then the next color, I'm actually going to add just a tiny bit of the magenta to my green. And red is the complementary color of green. So they're on the opposite sides of the color wheel, which means that if I add something from the red family into the green, it will just kind of tone it down a little bit. Right now, it's very, very vibrant shade of green. And I want to make it just a little bit more of a natural shade of green. So I'm just going to dip the tip of my brush into the magenta. I don't want to get loads and loads of paint on it. You can see it's just a little bit that I'm adding. And you can use red instead. I just used magenta because that was, I wanted to keep the colors for this class very, very simple with just the 4 colors. So just to keep it in the same family. So just drop a tiny bit of the magenta or red into your green. If you grab too much, that's no problem at all. Just go ahead and add more yellow and blue to your mixture to make it green again. And then we are going to mix our dark green just to add a little bit of variety to our painting. So I'm again going to scoop. We'll just do 3 this time because we'll be using a lot less of the dark green. So we'll do 3 scoops of water. So again, I'm just taking my brush and dropping the water onto the mixing area. Like so. And then I'm going to come into my Cadmium Lemon and drop that into my water. And rinse my brush. And then come into the Ultramarine. Really load that up. And drop that into my Cadmium Lemon. And because this blue is a different shade of blue to the cobalt, you can see immediately the shade of green is different. You can make it even darker by adding a bit more blue. And if yours look similar to each other, you can add a little more yellow to this one, a little more blue to that one, just to get a bit of difference. It's nice to just kind of have that variety. That's really what we're looking for, is a bit of variety. And then again, I'm going to add just a touch of the magenta to this green. Just to kind of dull it down just a little bit. I like to make things like a little more natural. So I want my colors vibrant. I don't want to completely turn it gray or brown, but just to make it a little bit of a more realistic green. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Also, if you're still mixing your colors, let me know, and I'll just take a pause here before we move on to start our painting. So I have green on my palette here. You can see next to the yellow. I can't remember, this is sap green. Sorry, you can't see that right here. This is sap green here. I can't remember the last time that I actually used it, and I have violet here, which is like a dark purple. I don't love using colors like those straight out of the tube. They tend to be quite saturated, not very realistic. I love to mix my own colors, and that's partly why I thought the lavender would be so nice, is to kind of get a bit of practice and kind of show you mixing colors. And purple and greens are perfect for practicing that. It just helps to give you a bit of variety. You'll notice that when your painting starts to dry, certain areas might be a little more yellow or a little more blue. And then, like I was mentioning earlier with the purple, you know, we have sections that are a little more blue and a little more magenta. And that just adds a level of like some dynamics to your painting, rather than it just being a flat, you know, single color, like the sap green. It would just be very green. So instead, it just gives a bit of dimension and interest to the painting. If my colors are super transparent, I need to add more paint. I'm using blocks, not tubes. Yeah, I would definitely recommend adding more paint. Don't be afraid to like really dig your brush in to kind of soften up those paints. There's nothing wrong with blocks or like the pans. They're great to work with as well. So there's definitely nothing wrong. It just, they're drier basically. So it just takes a little bit more effort to get the paint kind of working and flowing. So yeah, I would just add a bit more paint to your water mixture. I'm so excited. There's so many of you who are just painting for the first time, and that you've decided to do that with me. I just love that. I love that. You know, I really think that anyone can paint and anyone can enjoy painting. And so I just think it's so fun having people who are finally giving it a go. All right, so we're gonna get started. I'm just gonna move this over so I have my clear paper here. I'm sorry, but did I understand you have paint in your tin squeezed from the tubes? Yes, so the paint that's in all of these wells around the edge here are all from tubes of watercolor. Let me get one out here. Like this. So I just squeeze it into the well. It's nice because then you can kind of customize your colors and replace them as you need them as well. All right, so we're gonna get started on this left sprig of lavender. I'm gonna start with the top, the floral bit first. So I'm just gonna rinse my brush off in the dirty water and then rinse it off in the clean water. So we're starting with a nice fresh brush. And I'm just going to dab it on the paper towels because now I have a nice mixture in my paint wells. I don't want to be adding loads of water every time I go into the paint mixture. So I'm just going to use my paper towel to help control how much water is on my brush. So I'm going to take a bit of my purple mixture. And again, before I go onto the paper, I'm just going to dab a little bit of the excess liquid out of my brush. And if you want to watch me, I'll do it kind of section by section and take pauses, so then you can paint so you're not missing anything. All right, so I'm just going to use the tip of my brush pointing kind of diagonal and away from me to just make little line marks. Can even be smaller than that. And they don't even all have to be touching. Just make some tiny little marks, and these are going to be the flowers. I'm actually going to zoom this in because I feel like that would be more helpful. There we go. So you can see I've just done a couple little marks with the purple mixture. And I might even wipe off a little excess from my brush, dip it in the water, and dab that off a little bit again, just to have a nice light mixture. I don't want it to be super, super dark. So I'm just gonna come in again below that. I wanna keep it all nice and wet and flowy. And I'm just going to create these little, I'm just using the tip of my brush, and I'm basically just lightly kind of pressing the tip down and like almost just tapping at the paper, just to create that illusion of the lavender kind of flowers. And the nice thing about the lavender as well is, you know, they're not perfect floral shapes. They're just kind of little little dots in a way, like you know, it can be, basically what I'm trying to say is it can be imperfect. You know, you don't have to do perfect little shapes. So without rinsing my brush off, I'm going to just come into my light green, and I'm just going to add a little bit in the middle here, like so. And like the stalk of the lavender is going to be green, but we're going to have the little purple flowers kind of around it. So by me adding just a little bit of the green that's kind of mixed with the purple, and basically when I go back to add more purple, it just kind of gives that illusion that there's a stalk kind of behind the purple. So I'm just going to come in to my purple mixture. Just going to tap off a little bit of the excess on my paper towel here. And I'm just kind of doing these like different directions, even leaving little bits of white in between. So you can see I'm kind of twisting my brush almost horizontal to tap, and then I might twist it this way and just give a little tap as well, just to get some of the different directions. And if you rinse your brush off, tap off just a little bit of the excess water, and you can come in even just with a wet brush, and that will just kind of soften that and give you that nice soft purple. And while that's still wet, I'm going to rinse my brush off, and I'm going to rinse it off in my clean water. And then I'm just going to wipe some of the excess off on the side of the dish. I'm going to get the paper next to my painting wet, but I'm not going to touch the painting just yet. So this section here is wet. It's not soaking wet. There's not a big puddle sitting on top of it, but it's a bit wet. And I'm just going to then bring my brush over to the purple that we have on the paper. And you can see that just kind of bleeds out then and creates that nice kind of soft effect. And you can do it again. We could do it again down here. So again, I'm just going to get the section next to my painting wet. And then I'm going to kind of wiggle my brush up towards the painting. And it just creates that kind of those soft edges. And it will just help us create this really kind of soft, delicate watercolor. So when you do effects like that, you're really letting go of a lot of control with your painting. You know, you're just kind of adding a bit of water and letting the paint do its thing. And that's one of the beautiful things about watercolors, is that they kind of work on their own. And that's really when they shine, is when you let it go and just let them kind of work. All right, so while this is still wet, I'm going to take some of my light green, just dab off some of the excess, and just with the fine tip of my paintbrush, let's see if I can move my hand over so you can see better, touch the purples so that they kind of blend a little bit, and just kind of pull down a bit of the stem. And you can see in here, the green and the purple are just kind of blending and merging. And I really love that. I love those kinds of connections that when you touch two colors together, they make. I'm just gonna rinse my brush off again and come into my purple. And lavender tends to have a bit of flowers a short distance down. So I'm just going to, again, with the tip of my brush, pointing in a few different directions, just kind of tap the paper. And I'm not really trying to create perfect petals or shapes. I'm just kind of using just the very tip of my brush to create these small marks that kind of resemble the petals. And then once we have that done, I'm going to come into my light green and continue the stem down. And to do this, the rest of the stem, I'm just going to do it in little sections. So just with the tip of the brush, you know, I'm not trying to do one big line. I'm just going to do it kind of little section by little section. So tip of the brush, just kind of move it back and forth until you kind of hover over the paper until you get near the paper and you kind of create that line shape pulled down from the first line. And you end up getting a pretty nice line shape. And then I'm going to add some leaves down at the bottom of the stem. So to do that, I'm going to, with the tip of my brush, just press down on the paper very lightly. Press down a little harder so more of the brush is on the paper. And then as they come down to the base of the stem, lift up. So it kind of creates this wide, skinny effect. And pick up a little bit more paint for the other side. So you can even do it from the stem out. So again, just I'm pointing the brush kind of back at myself here this time. And I'm just using the tip of the brush and pulling along. And as I pull up, I'm pressing kind of a little bit more of the belly of the brush. And then as I go along, I'm lifting the tip up of the brush up, kind of pull away. Kind of gives you that shape. I just want to keep these sections wet while we move. So I'm just going to come straight in without rinsing my brush into the dark green. And I'm just, with the tip of the brush, while this is still wet, I'm just going to tap some of that dark green into some of this light green. And that just gives a little bit of the variety. I just rinse my brush in the dirty water and then again in the clean water. And kind of like we did with softening the edges up here, I'm just going to come along the stem, and I'm not touching the stem yet, but I'm just getting next to the stem wet, and then I'll just wiggle my brush up towards the stem. And that just creates that nice kind of soft effect. And I might do it down here again with this leaf while it's still wet. And then we're going to add a sprig here. That's going to be a sprig of just leaves. So I'm going to come into my light green. Start about 2/3 of the way up from the stalk. And again, I'm going to use that technique of just pressing down with the tip of the brush, then a little bit harder just to get a little bit of a wider middle of the leaf, and then lift up. So tip the brush, pressing down and lifting. It just kind of gives you that lovely lavender leaf shape. We'll do 2 of them kind of next to each other. I might just drop a little bit of, just tap them while they're still wet so they stay nice and wet and juicy as we're working. And it's amazing all the different shapes that you can create with your brush just by how you hold it and maneuver it. You can create tiny little markings. You can create big fat leaves and petals, you know, by really pressing down. So it's so versatile with the same brush, just depending on how you're using it and holding it. So then I'm just going to come down from these 2 leaves and create a bit of a stem. Again, just kind of pulling down little section by section down towards the base of this flower. And I'm going to come into my dark green just to add some nice variety. And I'm going to do the same technique of leaves, and I'm just going to add some leaves all the way down. Like so. I'm just going to pick up a bit of the light green. I'm not rinsing my brush in between the 2 greens. I'm just kind of letting them mix and merge on my brush, so I get a bit of an interesting kind of mix of greens. So I'll do 2 more of the leaves. Like that. Does anyone have any questions as we're going on the painting or mixes or painting in general? So I'm just going to rinse my brush again, because we're going to come back into our purple mixture here. So just want to rinse out the green really, really well, so it's not muddy when the colors aren't completely merged and we don't get a icky muddy color. All right, so we're going to do another lavender sprig here. So again, I'm just going to pick up some of the purple mixture. I'm going to tap a bit off. What do we do if we have too much water with our paint stroke? Do you mean like too much liquid, like on your brush? Or have your paint mixes become too watery? If you have too much liquid on your brush, like if you notice that like there's quite a bit of liquid when you put your on the brush, use your paper towels. Really kind of, you can dab them off like loads, because you can always pick up more. Depending on what brush you're using, the belly of the brush, this kind of the middle bit here, can hold a lot of liquid. So sometimes it doesn't seem like there's very much liquid on the brush until we go to put it on the paper and you're like, whoa, that's a lot of color, or that's a lot of water. So use your paper towels, or a towel or a sponge if you have one, and just kind of use that to dab off any excess. I'm using a koi tin and I can see how much richer your paints are. I haven't used koi in a long time, so I'm not sure exactly the difference, but yeah, these are Winsor & Newton professional paints, and they're my favorite for sure. When my paint dries, there's almost an outline that forms around it. How do I stop this from happening? Do you mean on the paper? I would just paint maybe a little bit wetter. So basically make sure you have enough paint and water kind of mixture on your brush. Your brush might be too dry as you're going. So basically it's drying really quickly as you're painting. So just make sure that that you've loaded your brush up. And if you're putting your brush basically on your paper, like if I kind of dried this out and I made a mark, you know, like a light kind of mark, that would dry quite quickly and it wouldn't blend with the other colors. So you just need to make sure that you have enough. All right, so we'll get started on the next one. So kind of similar to this one, I'm going to be making lots of little marks that are going to resemble the lavender flowers. So just with the tip of my brush again, so you can see there's kind of, it looks kind of dark, and that's because there's quite a bit of liquid kind of sitting on there. And that takes quite a bit of time to learn, you know, how much paint mixture to use, not use on paper. It really, really depends on what you're painting and how you're painting. So if you don't get it today, give yourself time and patience. It took me a really long time to learn all this stuff as well. It doesn't just come naturally. I did not pick up watercolors and immediately start painting really amazing creations. I'm gonna have to, I think I have some of my really old watercolor paintings at my mom's house, and I'm gonna have to find them and post them on Instagram sometime, because I just remember I used way too much paint. I just got the paper absolutely sopping wet, and just with puddles, and they did not turn out good at all. So again, I'm just using the tip of my brush. Kind of lost my blue mixture in the purple here, so I'm just gonna add a little bit more Cobalt Blue. I kind of love that like variation of different shades of purple kind of within the sprig. So I'm just going to pick up a little bit of a bluer purple here. And you can see I'm just kind of leaving some little white sections in between the sprigs. And so I'm just, again, creating these, using the tip of my brush just to create these like little lines that are, I'm just trying to make it look imperfect and natural, you know, not uniform. Just gonna rinse my brush off here and just add a little bit of water just to lighten this up a little as well. You can also use your brush to lift off paint. So if I think, say this section here has gotten a little too dark, I'll just kind of dry my paint brush off on the paper, and if it's still wet, then I can lift off and lighten some of that paint. And kind of like with the other one, I want to add a little bit of green into this top section. So I'm just picking up some of the light green, and I'm just going to kind of drop that in as well. So I just dropped a tiny bit of it up here, and I added a little bit of it just here at the bottom of where I've been painting the purple. And again, that will just kind of give the illusion of there being a green stalk, like green stem behind the purple flowers. And then I'll come back to my purple, and I just kind of let them blend together. If you added too much green, you can lift it off, like I just said, dry your brush off with the paper towel and just kind of lift off the green with your brush. So I've gotten a little bit more purple on my brush here, and I'm just going to continue this one down. Just dip my brush in water and dab some of that off so I can get some nice light purple. And the way that you control how, say, dark or light, or how like vibrant or light your paint is on the paper is by how much water is mixed with your paint. So if we had loads more water in this, this would be quite a runny, watery, light purple. And you can achieve that as you're painting as well. So if I make kind of a general nice mixture of purple, and then I can kind of use water and add that as I go to lighten up. Or the opposite, I can use then paint and add more paint to my mixture to make it more dark and opaque. And I just love creating kind of a bit of variety. So you can see there's a few different shades of purple. I'm just going to rinse my brush in the dirty water and the clear water. And while this is still wet, I'm going to soften it again. So I'm going to come onto this right side and add a bit of water onto my paper next to the flower, and then, or the flowers, and then just come and touch kind of the edges of them and let them bleed into this wet area. Like so. I just bought some lavender soap from a small soap company here, like a handmade soap company. And it smells so strong. It's so relaxing. I love having lavender in our bathrooms. I just think it's such like a soothing scent. It's so nice. And I'm going to pick up some of my light green, and I'm going to create a little bit of the stem like I did on this side here. So again, while that purple's still wet, just going to pull a little of the stem down and rinse my brush, come back into the purple while that's still wet, and add some of my flowers around the edge here. And again, we're not looking for perfect, you know, just use the tip of your brush to create some little dots and shapes. Don't worry if, you know, you don't want them all pointing one way, or they don't need to look perfectly fanned. Some of the beautiful things about nature is how imperfect it is. And if you make it too uniform, it doesn't look natural. So we're trying to create that kind of randomness as we go. And I just picked up a bit of my light green. And again, I'm going to pull the stem down and just kind of do it section by section. Until about there. Might come into the dark green, and while that stem is still wet, drop a bit of the dark green in, just to create a bit of variety. While this is still wet, I kind of want to soften the stem. I just want to make the painting quite soft and beautiful. So I'm just going to rinse my brush in the dirty water, rinse it again in the clean water. I'm just going to come along to the side here and get this wet, and then wiggle up to it and just really kind of soften that. And it's nice, like if you say you messed up the stem and you made a section of it really fat, and you know, it doesn't look like the flower stem, it's too wide, you just soften it like that, and you can kind of make it look like you did that on purpose. And then we're going to come in again and do another kind of sprig of leaves. And I'm just kind of mixing between the dark green and the light green at this point, you know, just with the tip of my brush, picking up the two greens. And I'm going to come over here a little bit higher than what we did the last time. And you'll see, because I brought that paint into this wet section, I get this nice kind of soft effect anyways. And I'm just gonna add another leaf. So again, I'm just using the tip of my brush and pulling down and then lifting up. You can see how it's nice and wet through here, so it's really just going to kind of bleed and be quite soft. I might create another leaf that goes across the stem. Like so. And I'll create one down here. And then I just want to create a little bit of the illusion of the stem of these leaves. So just going to add a fine line with the tip of my brush, kind of up through it. And if you did want to bring back, so say like this has gotten quite soft, you know, and say you did want to bring some of the leaves out, make them a little bit more obvious, if we wait for this kind of soft area to dry, then we can add some more leaves over this kind of blended soft area. So I might just wait a minute for that to dry and then add another leaf or two. Does anyone have any questions on the painting? How's everyone getting on with theirs? Excellent, awesome. Well, I'm so glad you're loving it. And I know it might seem kind of weird to use such a big brush for such tiny work. You know, we're really using kind of the tip for all the different shapes and stuff, but it just gives you a little bit more flexibility. It holds a lot more liquid in it than a small brush. You know, you would constantly be going back and forth, and your painting would be getting quite dry as you're working if you were using a lot smaller of a brush. The music I'm listening to, it's a playlist on Spotify called Relaxing Spanish Guitar. I know, it's so good. I absolutely love listening to it while I paint. It just really gets me in the mood. Yeah, so the brush that I'm using, Barbara, is a size 10 silver black velvet brush. It's on my art, if I pop in the material list for the US, it's on my material list as well, so you can find it at Blick. I've been using, well, I just replaced it a few months ago. The one I was using before this one was the same brush, but I've had it for like 5 years, and I only replaced it because I had a bad habit of leaving my brush in the water like this. And if you do that over time, you will lose this lovely point and your brush will start to get bent like that. So that's just another note. Do not leave your brush face down in the water like this. Definitely take it out and set it down in between painting, but it's a very easy habit to do, just leaving it in the water. So it's still a little wet, but it's dry enough. I'm just gonna add one more set of leaves, and then I'm gonna call this painting done. Just to kind of show you how we can add back some of that definition. Like so. And then I might just add a little bit of the stem. So you can kind of see if you've softened something a little bit too much, you really are able to kind of bring that back as well through layers. And that's something that we'll definitely go over in the class. This is just to kind of give you a taster. The paintings that we do in the class have a bit more to them, but especially if you're just trying painting for the first time, I wanted to give you something to kind of get started with, and that would be pretty and just kind of fun, and work on mixing colors and everything.
I hope you enjoyed creating this painting with me today. You are amazing, and I'm so glad you took this time out for yourself. Remember, you can always practice these techniques and revisit this painting again. In fact, I encourage it. If you have paint left over in your palette, you can use it even after it's dried. Just add water. To clean your palette, just wipe off the mixing areas with a damp paper towel to get yourself ready for your next painting session. Creating more paintings is what's going to help you learn and grow in watercolors. I'm so looking forward to our next time painting together.